Obviously, guys, we'll get started here on the restaurant again with just Gary and I, Gary Hashman and Butch Hiles. But here, and I already forgot what we just said because that's what I always do. I know that a couple of things we're just going to talk a little bit, but one of the things that we want to talk about is actually I do remember now, choosing a coach, or no, going from student to coach. Is that correct?
Yeah. So being a student and then the transition from student to coach.
Yeah, then choosing an affiliate, possibly, right? So actually, we can start with going to student to a coach, because I think you and I have had somewhat similar paths, but we went through the same thing, right? Like, I'll just kind of start. But when I started a gym, and I didn't really want to start a gym. I mean, actually, we had a little bit different. You were starting an established gym, and then things kind of changed. But actually, it was kind of similar. I'll just go through there was no, and I think we talked about it on here before, but there was no, I was looking for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and this was in the 90s in West Virginia. So there was no such thing at the time, at least no such thing at the time around me anywhere. So I joined a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu place. And so, the downside to that is, typically, and this is not always the case, but at least here in West Virginia, most of the time a black belt in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, maybe a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's just a little bit different than they do striking. They do some other things. So it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, which ultimately kind of transitioned from, me and a couple of students from there, meeting in my basement and kind of doing some stuff over on our own, or my garage, I guess, initially, and then to my basement. And then ultimately, it goes to what you're saying, as being a student to a coach, kind of. I was kind of forced into my role a little bit differently because there wasn't anything for what I was looking for. So, the group that I started with in the 90s were like, if we want Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we're going to have to make it. If we want MMA, we're going to have to make it. And then kind of go from there. Yours is a little bit different, right?
Yeah. So when I started, my original instructor was a blue belt. So I started as a white belt under a blue belt. And he was obviously small school. He was trying to build it up. Started a kids class. My daughter actually started doing jiu-jitsu in the kids class. And so it was kind of a almost immediate progression for me to go from like student to kind of helping out instructing. But as far as like becoming a teacher, I think I've got natural teaching tendencies. And we had a falling out, me and my instructor. He had gotten his brown belt as a purple belt at the time. We had a falling out between us. And it's not unlike, just relationships in general. Sometimes things get a little toxic for the two. It doesn't mean anybody's a bad person or you hate each other, or maybe he does hate me, I don't know. But things end. And so we kind of went our own ways. And I was sort of in like jiu-jitsu purgatory, where I was a true Ronin, right? Where I didn't have an instructor and I still wanted to do jiu-jitsu. And I talked to a lot of people, but me and him had all the people that I felt that I could kind of turn to were friends with both of us. And I didn't want it to make it weird for their relationship with him. So there were lots of black belts that I knew in Columbus, and I trained with a lot of those black belts in Columbus, and I was training with them, but they were friends with him, and I didn't want it to be weird, me leaving him and then going to them, and then them having to explain themselves to him about, hey, Gary's my student now. And so I kind of did this thing where it's just like I was doing my own thing for a while. Now I actually started kind of like a kids academy before I had left him. And that was just so I could get extra time with my son doing jiu-jitsu. And so, and we had already kind of been on the outs. So I kind of felt that I was leaving anyway. And I'd started my own thing, which was probably a dick move by me. I don't know. It wasn't in the same town. And, I was 30 minutes away from where he was. So It wasn't anywhere close to where he was. But I was kind of already felt like I was on my way out. We were kind of on the outs anyway. So, I was doing kids class for my son just so I could spend more time with him. There were a couple adults that were interested in it, that were in that area, and they wanted to train with me. And so I started teaching them and, kind of looking for somebody. And that's kind of when I found you.
Yeah, well, and I think in a weird way, we all have similar paths, that neither So you hit on something that kind of it rung a bell when you said it too. You said I kind of naturally have teaching tendencies or leadership tendencies, right? I think the same thing, right? I didn't know I had that until like I have that, right? Like, does it make sense? Like I didn't like say, hey, like I'm a natural coach or a natural leader. Like it doesn't really dawn on you, but looking back at everything that I did, I can see probably what you see and all those things, right? Like where, in the mid 90s, I was learning boxing. That's what I started with. And I was having this Marine, he was teaching me in Golden Gloves in Cleveland. But I would immediately go and everything he taught me for and all the lessons that I was paying for, I would come back home and get my friends and show them for free. Not not because I wanted to start a gym. It was just like I felt like I just wanted to share with people, right? Like and on another note, those people were never going to take lessons for this guy. So I want to make straight like clear that these guys, I wasn't doing anything weird. But I was also like 16, 17, right? So then all of a sudden I have this group of kids in my attic and we're doing boxing, little by little, whatever he shows me, I show them, and we kind of start a little club. But my point of that story is that looking back, that's like, I've been coaching people since I was 16 or sharing things with people. And obviously people cared enough to join me and follow me, right? Which all things that I didn't really realize were happening. I just was sharing, and I wish somebody would share with me, but the reason I didn't was probably because that's not everybody's natural inclination, right? Is to go out and coach and share. And because one of the things is, even when you're sharing, you're teaching, or at least you're trying to, and meaning that like the guy would show me a jab and how to hide your chin, or hide your chin under your deltoid, your shoulder, and do all this stuff. And so then when I show somebody a jab and they weren't doing it, then I'm more or less coaching and doing stuff and picking stuff up. But also, as we both know, those are kind of the things that actually make you a better jujitsu player too, right?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is like part of the coaching stuff, even when I was still a Hiles and Gracie student, part of the coaching and like helping out with class or whatever was a chance for me. Anytime I'm teaching a technique, I really have to make sure that I'm not saying something that's wrong. So
Yeah.
it re-emphasizes proper technique for me, in the slow sense that I have to get this as right as I can get it. That way I don't teach somebody poor technique. And so it's almost, those are extra mental reps for me, and making my jujitsu better, because when I share it with somebody, I don't want to screw it up when I tell them.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I've been having this talk like nonstop at my gym, because we have a lot of classes and I'm not there very, often, 2-3 times a week. But when guys show something, that's like immediately what they say is just, they repeat what you just said, is that, man, I couldn't believe how much better this made me, because I had to actually break it down, where I just did it before without thinking, did what I thought you showed me. And then when I go to teach it, it turned out I was missing 3 or 4 steps because I never really thought about it. Plus, I didn't really know why I was doing it. And the why, as I always express, is the most important thing. That's when everything comes together, because now you can set up a trap and set all this stuff because you know the why, right? Not just the technical 1-2 move, But yeah, so it's a weird path. I think both of us ended up, and we've learned things through the years. And I think another thing I was kind of thinking of too, when you said is, like like in your scenario, for example, looking back, like when you're young, like you don't really have good communication skills or good anything. You don't have like a frame of reference for anything, right? So I'm not saying what you did was wrong either. I don't want to, like we don't want to get into those things, like nitpick that either on either one of us. But what I was gonna say is what we all probably could have did back in the day that I learned from now is just communicate, right? Like if in a special way, because we can also say like, hey, I did that, I voiced my concerns. But if you're like, hey, here's what's going on, I'm not getting what I need, you're awesome, and like disarm the person, do this, and then it's not you, it's me, like the typical breakup thing. But just communicate. And I think ultimately, if I look back at some of the things I did, which always in my mind had good intentions that could be read wrong, it could have been helped a little bit with communication. Not that things would have necessarily went differently, but what I do think is people are initially mad at things, and then over time they can think back to the conversation and the communication, and then maybe dissect that further, and then it lessens the blow later on. Or I mean, the only reason I bring that up is just because it's something like a life skill that I'm trying to learn more now, right? Because there's so many times that I've got mad at somebody because I expect them to think the way I think, and they in turn think a different way, and they expect me to think the way they think, and we don't have a conversation and tell each other how we think, and then also validate the other person's point, right? Because it's not like an argument like you need to believe me, and say no, like, hey man, you're exactly right, I just don't think that way. That's why we
Well,
need.
and it gets to a point where you sit in, because you're not talking about it, you sit and stew in
Absolutely.
what you're thinking they think, when
Yeah.
what you're thinking they think might be completely wrong, you know? And so you sit and stew on that, and that just pisses you off more. And so then when you finally talk, it can't be a conversation, it's an argument.
Especially, yeah, and then add in what we do, right? It's a manly thing, although some people, as the running joke we have, some people would argue jiu-jitsu is not very manly. We know that it is. It's just a joke. I'm just kidding. But some of the positions that we joke about. But anyway, like, add in the personalities and the manliness to all those things, these communication things don't go good. But again, that's neither here nor there. I think the point is where we got to where we got. And
Well, I
then
was
we're
going to say too, I think a big, for me, like thinking about like the transition from, it was kind of, it sort of is accidental, you know. For me, jujitsu is kind of like it's like the new toy, right? Like, when I started learning jujitsu, it was like, hey man, I just got the new Super Nintendo. Do you want to come over to my house and check out the Super Nintendo? Because it's always more fun to play with your friends.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so jujitsu was the same way. It's like, man, it's this cool new thing, and I have this cool new thing, and I want to show it to you. And hopefully, because I think it's so cool, maybe you'll, and it doesn't matter. There's a lot of things in life like that. Maybe I think Marvel comics are cool, and I have a collection of all of the X-Men comics. And then I share them with you. And then you're like, check out this Walking Dead comic that I found. It's the same thing. And it was just, this was one of those things. And I just got I was I'm not great at jujitsu or anything, but I did have a better progression than most people, and a faster progression than most people. And because I took to it so quick, part of it because I obsessed about it, and it's all I thought about when I was at work. I wasn't really at work. I was kind of doing jujitsu. When I was driving home from jujitsu, I was kind of doing jujitsu. It was just all in my head. But and I would, I'm an obsessive note taker on jujitsu. And so I just thought about it more than everybody else. Kind of got, I think that kind of helped in my trajectory as far as like getting good and having, success at competitions and stuff. And but I always wanted to, I still think it's the greatest thing. And
Yeah.
I haven't lost that passion for it. And I want more people to do it. And so I just that's kind of where, for me, having natural tendencies as somebody who's, I'm fairly good at explaining tedious steps in a fun way. So like, when it comes to talking about how to do a mounted armbar, I'm pretty good at breaking it down and making it easy to learn. I have pretty good skills at, transferring information to other people, and then keeping it fun, and kind of joking around, which I think, it's something other, a lot of instructors are really good at, is like kind of cutting through all the silliness of, like you said, jujitsu is a weird thing where it's like guy on guy, almost looks like guy on guy porn,
Yeah.
right? And so to like you have to kind of cut through some of that with jokes to make it comfortable, because it's an intimate setting and you're doing it. And then on top of being an intimate setting, the outcome is also, I'm choking you or I'm breaking your bones. And so
Yeah.
you have to temper that a little bit with comedy, or saying things in a way that is kind of silly.
You gotta break it up. Yeah. And that it's a good transition from what we're talking about too, is like becoming from a student to a coach or instructor, right? That is part of it. There's so many intangible things that, especially without having a list prepared, because we're just having a regular conversation, right? Like, I couldn't tell you all the things that are intangible that that you have to have. Like, being a leader is very important, right? And part of being a leader, you're going to have a lot of these intangible things. but there's so much. Like I know a lot of like a lot of my friends and guys at the gym say my dream's to have a gym, right? Which I encourage them to do that, I guess, if that's what they want. But I also know some of the people that say it in my mind, I think I'm, yeah, I just don't think it's going to work. And like, and like, reason I'm kind of stumbling because I'm thinking, that's not nice, but I'm not doing it from a bad place. I'm just doing it because like, I know their personality and I'm thinking.
Well, on top of that, you also know what it is to own a gym. And that's the bigger thing is like owning and running a gym is not owning and running a gym. Like it's not just doing jujitsu anymore. Right. It is all of the stuff that nobody sees. It's you have okay, as far as like coaches go, you're like the best coach and you treat your students the best and you have parties, but like all of that, like somebody's cleaning up, somebody has to make sure the mats are clean, somebody has to make sure money's coming in, somebody has to make sure. Students aren't doing that. Students aren't cleaning toilets, and students aren't making sure bills. I mean, their money pays the bills if they pay, but like all of that responsibility falls on the guy owning the gym. And that's all it's the dirty stuff that nobody sees. When they think like, oh man, it would be cool to do a gym, they just think, oh, I get to train jujitsu all the time. No, there's more than that.
There's more than that. Yeah. You're exactly right. And that's the part that ultimately for most people makes jiu-jitsu not fun anymore. Right. That's where I go through periods of burnout, right? Because I've had a gym really since 2002. So 20 years. I mean, there's been periods I didn't, but up and down. Right. So it's like, that's the part. It's never jiu-jitsu, never the rolling and the teaching and stuff that gets old. It's the fact that I've got to do all the other stuff on top of that. Look, this is not my profession nor your profession, right? We both have jobs on the side and families who also have jobs. And that's when things get a little bit crazy, right? Because you've got that on top of that. And then here's the thing, we're dealing with so many personalities, right? So inevitably there's going to be people that are angry about something that may or may not have something to do with me. They're angry at other students or, they're angry at this, they're angry at that. Just personality, right? Like I wish everybody was positive all the time, not because I'm positive all the time, but I try to hide it. I just don't want to walk in. I'm like, here's our fun time from, let's say 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. This is our time to have fun and get together. I don't want, 3 or 4 guys in there just tell me about how shitty their day is and how miserable they are every day. Like, I don't want to be around them and they suck the energy out of us. Right. So then at some point you have to address that in a nice way, which goes back to what I was saying earlier, is the communication thing that I'm still trying to learn, because also I have a tendency, just like you mentioned, of letting things go for a while, hoping they'll resolve themselves, and then they get worse. Then you got to deal with them, all the unfortunate things that nobody thinks of. Right. And then on top of that, you're just trying to make sure everybody's happy every single day. You can't be on every day. That's not my personality. We've talked about it before. You're probably more suited for this as an extroverted person, where I'm an introverted person that nobody knows about. Right. It takes a lot of energy for me to even be on here and look the way that I'm like, this is not me. Like, it doesn't make sense to nobody. I get it. But my real thing would be sitting on TV, or like, this is not a joke. Every time I say it, I would be sitting watching Ancient Aliens and Bigfoot shows all day long and never leave the couch. There's something wrong with me. Like, there really is. And I have to force myself to get up, do the things I want to do, and progress. Now, everybody's always like, you're so busy. How do you get stuff done? Because I don't do the things I want to do, which is also exhausting, because my mind's like, let's just watch some Ancient Aliens. It'll be fine. But if I stop, that show's on all day. Like, yeah. I will never stop. You know what I mean? But yeah, anyway, it's like, so you embrace that role. You have to get there.
Well, I'm just thinking back to like owning a gym and people saying they want to own a gym. It really is even more so than all the dirty stuff, the taking care of the business side of it. Like, if you own a gym, how is your wife, if you work, because most gym owners also work a regular job, whether they're police officer, they're tax attorney, or whatever it is, they have another job besides just the gym. It's very rare that you find somebody who can just do the gym. If they can, that's great, but usually they have something outside of the gym that is their profession. So how do you explain, if you've got a wife, that on top of working my 40-hour work week, I'm also going to be at the gym 6 nights a week?
Yes.
And,
Well,
s- and that's another part of it that gets weighed in, is like, you don't see that, because you're probably not going to make enough money starting out, certainly, to run a gym,
ever.
and or ever, um and relationships other than jujitsu relationships start to get affected, even if you're just training to compete. those
Yeah.
those those
Well,
those relationships get affected.
that's arguably, it's definitely worse than just being at the gym, but it's up there with being an instructor, because that means you're going to be at the gym all the time, right? Like it's up there. And you're right, that's another, it goes back to, it's weird that I keep talking about this now, but like communication again. And reason I say that is I don't know how many talks I've had with guys at the gym in private of them, their wife or girlfriend, they're like, they're bitching at me. I mean, I could be out doing drugs. I tell them all the time, I'm not doing drugs, I'm just working out. Then I'm like, you're 100% right. I get you, like 100%, because I've had that same argument, But then ultimately, she has feelings too, right? All she's saying is she misses you. Like that's a good thing. You should have a wife or girlfriend that misses you. So you've got to figure this out, right? Like, so when you are finally off of the gym, that time should be devoted toward, like, you should not also now be at the house watching alien shows, which would be me right now. When I'm at the house, I'm like, okay, this is my wife's time or my kids' time. Like I have a rule that, if my kids, which is going to be a bummer, they don't know this, so now I might screw. If they watch this, I'll be screwed. But if they ask me to do something, I almost never say no, right? And this happens all the time. I work all day, I'll drive all day. I get home, first thing I'm looking for is just sitting down, just walking in, sitting down. And then, my kids are amped up. I walk through, like, yeah, let's go play basketball. So the whole car ride, and I've got 3-hour car rides. Like the other day, I came back from Pittsburgh, right? For the whole 3-hour thing, even though I'm just sitting, it's exhausting. I was like, man, I cannot wait to sit down, relax, close my eyes. And then it's like, let's go play basketball. So again, my rule is if I can, I'm going to go. So that's what I did. Ultimately, the funny thing is about that, though, just to mention, it does make you feel better. Even though I'm like, I would love to just sit down and lay down and do that. When I do not, and even I fight the feeling, I mean, I do feel better, and that tiredness it goes away. And then I'm thankful that I spent that time with my kids, right? And that's my point there, is that if I didn't spend that time with them, now I'm neglecting them for the gym. So I've got a good balance. It might not be what my mind wants to do all the time. And then, my wife and I, we make sure we do date nights, we do this and that, not getting into relationship advice. But my point is, it's because of all the talks that I've had with those guys. I was the same person before, having the same argument with my wife saying, well, I'm not doing drugs, I'm just working out. You should love it. Like, what's wrong with you? And then that's what I had to realize. It's like, no, like if my wife was, and she does CrossFit all the time. She works out all the time. And like, there's a point you want to see them, like, you want to spend
Yeah.
time with. That's
And we joke about it here that jujitsu is my mistress, right? Like, if I'm not spending time with family, I'm spending time with jujitsu. That's all there is. There is nothing for me. Honestly, I'm the most boring person, because all I do is work, family stuff, jujitsu. Don't ask me about anything else. Maybe I listen to some podcasts and stuff while I'm at work or whatever, but that's all I'm interested in. If everything else ended and I just had those 3 things, I'd be okay.
Which is awesome. But that's also why, how many times, I don't know if you listen to the podcast either, but the Danaher podcast, right? Like for Joe Rogan, they jokingly talk about him where there'll be nobody else like him, because he's literally obsessed when he trains all day, teaches all day, comes home and watches videos all day or all night, and literally does. He watches wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, can name. And I've heard his podcast, and like, he knows everything about chess. He knows everything, like it's not a joke, right? A lot of us say, I mean, people we know say they trained all day, but they really just went to the gym twice and took 2 pictures. They didn't really train all day. This guy's doing it, right? And you got to be a special breed to do that, which, if I had a coach, that's what I would want, right? I'm guilty of not having that balance for a long time, where I would say, and I've corrected it since, where, just where I haven't been exhausted. And I'm like, okay, I worked all day. Now I did jujitsu. Now it's time and then time for my family. But what I was missing was still studying jujitsu, still being current on jujitsu, because jujitsu always does evolve, right? So I was kind of guilty of a while just waiting for a seminar and learning at the seminar, and then probably not really drilling those moves, maybe getting 1 or 2 of the 900 moves down, because that's what I was doing. But I've done a better job in the last year and a half or so of going to like BJJ Fanatics and buying, every time there's a good video on sale, like I just like throw it in the catalog and wait. Now I've got this giant catalog of stuff to study from. I save videos all the time on Instagram, YouTube, whatever. But that also keeps it fun, right? Because that's the times I was getting burned out because I was doing the same thing every day, and like I wasn't stimulating my mind anymore.
Well, and that kind of goes back to, and this is no knock on Hoist, but you had talked about it, like Hoist would come around and it's like, hey, we're doing headlock escapes again.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what we've been training. You want it's you got to have a little bit of variety, a little bit of something new. You don't want to get too complacent in the same thing all the time and not grow. There has to be growth. If you don't feel like you're growing, I think, honestly, I think there are two things, and this will kind of lead us into choosing an affiliate or choosing a coach. But I think there are two things that people leave jiu-jitsu for. One, I think they get bored doing the beginner stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Like and I think that's the reason we see a lot of blue belts leave, is because most of the classes are designed for beginners. And then usually 1 or 2 nights a week, there's an advanced class. But if you can't make the advanced class and you really like jiu-jitsu, you go to the beginners class so you can get some extra time in, or whatever. So people after you get blue belt, you're like, okay, I don't really need to do the hook sweep anymore. Like, I've done this same hook sweep class 10 times now, 12 times now. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to learn the berimbolo, or I want to learn whatever it is, something fancy or something newer. And so I think there's that. And then the other thing that I think people leave for is that, and this kind of leaves the idea of that, getting bored with it, is what did they originally sign up for? And I was kind of talking about this the other night. Some people sign up because they want a basic understanding of self-defense, and they want to feel like, okay, if something happens on the street, I can at least keep myself safe. And so once you get to blue belt, for the most part, I think most blue belts can keep themselves safe if they get into a street altercation. Even if it's 5 years down the road after they leave at blue belt, they at least have that experience and a general understanding of jiu-jitsu that they're probably going to be okay. Yeah. So if that was what they signed up for and they got that, why do they need to stay there? They weren't there. They didn't sign up to become a black belt. They signed up to get self-defense skills and feel competent on the street. And that's why we lose them. Maybe they didn't fall in love with jiu-jitsu the same way everybody else fell in love with it who stays till black belt. And part of, and this is kind of like, as a coach, trying to keep people in jiu-jitsu, but part of our job is to explain to them why they need to stay till black belt. Why is it important that you don't have just self-defense skills? Why is it important that you get your black belt in jiu-jitsu? Why is this thing so special that, I think everybody should want a black belt and have that kind of knowledge, or have that love for it. And, it's hard because so few people make it to black belt. So few people make it to purple belt.
Yeah. Well, and, part of that studying, I've listened to some podcasts of, we mentioned Danaher and stuff, but, some of the best ones I listened to were some of the old Gracies that made us start this whole thing. In particular, one that comes to mind is Jean-Jacques Machado. Because when I listened to it, I realized his whole life, and he preached it. And I remember that's when I started jiu-jitsu. I had the same feeling that he still has, but jiu-jitsu is life for him. So if you do jiu-jitsu, you live the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. And that's what the Gracies believe. Like when you listen to Hickson's podcast and do that, like, they had the Gracie diet, they got this, right? But everything is jiu-jitsu. So like Jean-Jacques, like he runs, he's older now, right? He still runs because of jiu-jitsu, like, you're right, to stay in shape for jiu-jitsu. And then since he's so good, like he runs a bunch before class and does a bunch of stuff before class to tire himself out. And he doesn't tell, his students that, but that way he's always just like training for something. He doesn't party. He doesn't do crazy stuff because he's being true to the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. He wants to be good at jiu-jitsu. And but even his personality is because of jiu-jitsu. Like he talks about, like, because he's like, I get this all out. He's like, so if he had a great story that I'll paraphrase, and it would be better if you listen to it because it's a good story, but just about, somebody starting to fight with him, maybe at a bar or something, and he's just like, oh man, buddy, you'd kill me, and yeah, it's like, oh, blah blah blah, just kept going. He's like, buddy, I know you win, and just on and on and on. And then, like months later, that guy happened to sign up randomly, and then was like, oh shit, like, you're a legend, thank God you didn't kill me, and like the whole thing. And then he was like, yeah, but I am that way because of jujitsu, right? I get this out of my system. I can let another man, do what he needs to do and feel comfortable in my body. And we both kind of walk away the situation feeling good about it. And that's something you can't do without jujitsu. But anyway, like those conversations remind me that, that, and it's a learning thing. So I guess my point would be, even though I guess, you fight to get to black belt, right? And then you're like, that's the other thing. Most people don't know what that means anymore, because you're not done, right? And until you get there, we've all heard another black belt say, that's when the learning begins. And all of us say, shut up. No, it doesn't. I just want my damn black belt. You're saying that because you have a black belt, right? Like, you don't believe it, but it's true. And those are one of the things that's the learning thing. Because it's like, if you shut it all down because now you got the black belt, just like you're joking with the blue belt, it's the same bad thing. I don't want to be a teacher that shut it all down because I don't have nothing to train for anymore. And a lot of us have been, I have friends that are guilty of that. They that was their goal, and they don't do anything anymore, right? And now people talk about them. I know because they talk to me about it. It doesn't mean they're not a black belt, right? But they're like, why didn't this guy do this? Why didn't he does that? I know why, because his goal was to get this. Like, that's it. He got his goal. He didn't remake any goals, right? That's it.
Yeah,
right?
well, and that's the thing, is like at some point you gotta for me, it's just hard to, like, how do you spend a decade doing something and then just kind of like, I'm done with it?
It's tough though.
And some people do it. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't have very many friends who have become black belt and then were like disappeared or anything like that. But like the entire time I've done jujitsu, I think, and man, there's so many cliches, like chase the knowledge, don't chase the belts, and all that stuff. But like, for me, it really wasn't about, like, I am ecstatic that I can say that I'm a black belt now, but black belt wasn't on my mind when I was a white belt. I was just like, this is cool, and I want to learn this, and I want to get really good at this, and then I want to do it to other people. And then I would find something else that was new, and like the belts happened anyway.
Yeah.
Whether I was chasing them or whether I wasn't chasing them, they were going to happen anyway. And so the whole time it was always just like, this is one more new skill. And after you start, there are only so many different real positions, there are only so many submissions. There are just different ways to get into them. So then it became like, okay, what about transitions? Yeah. And so now it became about, okay, now what are all the different transitions? And then after you start learning all the transitions, like, okay, now what are all the traps that I can set to lead people into the transitions that can lead them to the submission? Mm-hmm. And so it's always just trying to find another layer to make it my jujitsu better, not to get a belt, and it's hard to try and describe that to people, and trying to like, this is what you should be after. Everybody wants the belt. Yeah. And it's not that I didn't want to be a black belt, I wanted the belt, but that was like, what really was interesting to me was the knowledge to, for the lack of any better terms, the knowledge to make another man submit to me. Yeah. That's always been it. That's always been what nugget of jujitsu truth do I not hold yet that I need to hold to make somebody tap?
I mean, I think I agree, right? I think I would argue in a nice way. I just want to be the best person in the room, right? So that's when I started, and again, and I mean by nice way because I wasn't trying to hurt anybody and I was also trying to boost those same people along the way. Like, if it did happen or we're getting neck and neck, it's like, hey, here's what I'm doing, right? And so we are all progressing together, which probably why I'm a coach, right? Somebody else could just be out to smash everybody and they don't really care, knowing, but it's always been on my mind to help people. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing, man. Like I said, and that goes back to what I was saying, like people just don't think the same, right? I think you and I, that's exactly the same path. We all want the black belt because it's a recognition, and it is something. It's a graduating that decade or more of everything that we did. But at the same time, it's going to come. I wasn't worried about that, right? I just might have took longer than some, might have been quicker than some. I just really wasn't worried. But I do think, going back to the people that I know, some of them, they just set a goal. Like, I'm going to be a black belt by this time. And these might be people that really aren't very goal oriented. So that was like the only goal they ever set in their lifetime, right? They just didn't readjust and they hit it. But also, what do you do if, some people too, like maybe they're higher ranked people and they're getting thrust into teaching. I know a lot of people in that role. I was hanging out with some people the other night that are in a similar role where they teach, but they don't want to, right? It's like, and I think that's what we kind of talked about. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was just kind of talking about, these people are like similar skill level, but they all kind of have a little bit different ideals, right? And that's what I told him. I said, here, what you're missing is a leader. I said, no offense, that doesn't mean that you're not or they're not, but nobody stepped up to the plate this entire how many years it's been and said, here's what we need to do, and then do it. I said, like, I never thought that's what I did, but I did, because looking back, and that's, the conversation like this makes me think of stuff like that, but that's always what happened. It was just like, there was 10 of us. Unknowingly, I was the guy that stepped up and said, hey, let's meet on Wednesday at 6 and let's go over this. Like, just because, nobody else was saying anything. So I wasn't doing it because that's the thing, but like, that's part of a natural leadership or coaching thing that I didn't know I had. Maybe I didn't know I was doing. Maybe you didn't know I was doing until you had to think about it, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, now that you think about it, like that you say that, I think back, and I tell my guys this all the time, but nobody ever does it, is like, and that, not, it doesn't make me special. It just, this is what I did. Right.
Yeah.
But like, if I was getting stuck in a position, maybe I would ask a few questions, but then I would, this was back in the days when you weren't supposed to use YouTube.
Yeah, I know.
for
We got
jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And now there's a whole website dedicated to it, but you weren't supposed to use video instruction. But I would seek out books, or I would seek out instruction on YouTube and find something to fix the problem. And then you go to Open Mat, which everybody knows that Open Mat is a place to play, but I would use Open Mat as a place to drill. And I'd be like, listen, I know that we've got a 6-minute timer set. For the first 3 minutes of this timer, can I just drill this so I can get some reps in on this move that I want to learn? And then after that, the next 3 minutes, if you want to drill something, we can do that. Or if you want to roll, we can roll, but I just need 3 minutes of drilling this. And I would do that with every partner. And I'm sure I pissed a lot of people off because I was stealing half the round from them. But like, there were also some guys who were encouraged by that, and they were like, yeah, let's learn something together. And so I would do the move, but that was the whole thing. It was like, let's learn this. Let's not just play for an hour. And I think that might be another thing that people leave for, is because they're not trying to learn. They're just trying to have fun,
Yeah.
And jiu-jitsu is fun for a long time, but there are some guys who only show up to Open Mats.
There is, because they love that, right? That's like playing a game of pickup basketball, right? But you didn't put in work and work your shot. You're just playing basketball every week, and you don't really get better. But most people think they are getting better, and maybe they are. And here's the thing: they actually are.
Yeah.
It's from A to B. You're talking a long, long time. Where A to B with drilling and doing other stuff is a lot shorter time. You're both going to get there, but I would prefer to get there in a shorter amount of time than the other, right? And listen, man, other people do learn differently, but I think a lot of people convince themselves they don't need to drill and do stuff like that because they're like, well, I can do it right away. Well, you can, but do you, like, here, for example, what I'm having now is like, I've been doing jiu-jitsu forever. I have a game that I do and it's fine, and it's worked all these years, but I want to progress and do new stuff, do fun stuff. So I'll work on it for months and do it. But if I don't stay on that stuff, it goes back away. Like I go back to what I'm used to, right? My mind just is so engrooved in those patterns that's what I want to do. And the other stuff could be working great. I just got to really actively stay on it until maybe I get those 10,000 reps, which is part of the drilling, right? And then it'll just be stuck in my body. Like
That was something I was going to talk to you about, is like, I have these times, this kind of leaving what we're talking about, and now we're just bullshitting, but I have these times where it's like, I will revisit stuff because of curriculum, or, it's advanced class and it's something that's not really part of my game that I don't really go over. And then, it could be like a deep half series or something that I don't play anymore. But then I'll go over it and I'll be like, why the hell did I stop doing that? It's so effective. And then for the next 2 months, that's all I do.
But do you think, this is what I've figured out, and maybe this is what's happening to you, if something's really effective, which makes no sense because I feel like my game's effective, that's why it's my game, but there's moves I quit doing because I just like tap people all the time or sweep people all the time. So I'm like, well, I need to do something different. Yeah. And then like I literally forget about that move, and it was like my best move, right? Like it's funny, and then I'm like, but the ironic thing is though, when I usually go back to it, like I'm not as good at it as I once was for some reason. I'm like, I used to crush this thing. Why am I not good at it? No, it could be an aspect of people getting better by that time or something. I don't know, but there's like, it's a bummer because I think that's also the problem of being an instructor or whatever. Like if you're a good one, you're not going to just tap people all day without helping them understand what you're doing and move on and say, here's why you're getting tapped. Please don't let me do this no more because it's not fun for me and I want you to get better, right? And then maybe that's why it goes away. I don't know. But yeah, you're exactly right. We joke about that all the time, is that I'm like, oh yeah, like I forgot about this move, and like like when I like right now I've been doing a lot of butterfly half guard stuff, which is like one of my specialties, but I had to put it together in a comprehensive form. Like I know what I do when I'm rolling, but I don't really have, it wasn't like cataloged in a way where I was like, if this move fails, you do this one and do this. Like I might have naturally been doing that, but it wasn't like cataloged the way that you learn from a DVD or an instructional, right? So cataloging those things in order to teach it has been a huge thing. And then there's moves that, again, like you said, either I quit doing and I'm bringing back, or I wasn't that good at, and now I can try to make myself better at, because maybe my game wasn't evolved enough at the time, or I didn't take the time to learn it enough. And now I'm like, well, I've got all the other moves down. Why don't I go back to this one? Or I can actually pick out people that are doing that now. Because the other thing, sometimes it's like, if the guy backs up, you do this. Well, if nobody's ever backing up, everybody's pressure passing, moving forward. Like I never used that thing until finally somebody comes in and their game is what was never using, because that's what they're doing. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, finally there's that guy I can do that thing on, which is good. Like I said, and then it's being a beautiful thing. I think again, that which goes back to me when I was teaching, watching those BJJ Fanatics videos and seeing how they're cataloged and put in order. And so when I'm going back and looking at things that we teach a lot of curriculum at the gym, or did, but I've let kind of Wes and them do that. And obviously I still do that on the side, but I'm trying to do things they don't do. Like we have enough people now where we have all these fundamental classes, and then, I try to do a thing with everybody. So we try to go off script and do a bunch of, like you said, I want to keep it interesting. I want to keep it fun, and then it's tough, but just so it's tough, right? Like for people that haven't heard me talk in the gym, because I usually make fun of people some days, like when I'll have brand new people come in and I'm like, today is the worst day for you. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because I'm doing some complicated X guard stuff that's going to make zero sense. And like people are like, well, why don't you have them do this? I'm like, because for once it's your turn. I want the purples and browns and stuff to be happy, and I'm not going to dumb it down. I can make them do something off on the side, and sometimes I do. But I remember also when Marcelo Monteiro would show me the most complicated moves that I knew in my head I was never going to do. I still had fun. I was like, and I'm not saying everybody would, but I enjoyed the technical aspect of jiu-jitsu that I didn't understand. Like when he was saying that, like, that's what was blowing my mind. I was like, man, that's crazy. How many steps and how many grips and how many thoughts, like, I'm not there. You know what I'm saying? And I enjoyed it,
Well, and me and Wade, because I'm training with Wade now, a new affiliate of yours. And Wade, me and him kind of had a conversation about having an advanced class. He's obviously, I'm a black belt now. He's a purple belt. He's wanting to learn newer stuff and progress his game as well. Maybe different setups that I know that he hasn't been exposed to. And so, that's what those advanced classes are for. And sometimes you got people that can only make it on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And Tuesday night is advanced class night. Or you have a situation where we've got somebody who's a blue or a purple belt and their wife is a white belt and they want to come, or their friend is a white belt, but they only want to come with their friend,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And so you get into this situation where it's like, okay, we're going over a Kimura trap series, but somebody doesn't know how to do a Kimura.
Yeah.
That can be difficult. And so, you know, as an instructor, it's like, okay, you know, newbie white belt, all I want you to concentrate on is the Kimura while everybody else is doing this cool shit that looks amazing, you know,
Yeah.
where we're spinning around and we're sweeping, we're taking the back, and you know, we're attacking with the Kimura in different ways. You are just going to do the Kimura. And so it's usually that's the way I try and figure that out, is like,
Yeah.
everything else is probably watch it, but it's, you need to learn how to do the Kimura first.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of times too, that's what I'll say. I was like, look, even if you get this move down, you're probably not gonna be doing this for 5 or 6 years or something. They'll be like, why? And I'm like, you don't even know what half guard is or full guard, let alone butterfly half guard to single X to this or that. You know, I'm like, just don't worry. Just look at it as a cool thing right now. And then, you know, my job is just to try to make it as fun as I can and make sure they're okay. Right. Like, because, and I'll say, like, listen, this is not all the time, but I'm rewarding those guys, because normally if this happens and half the class is whites, and you know, then I'll go, okay, I can't do what I wanted to do, we're gonna have to do this, and they always suffer. So for now, you know, then everybody's fine with it. But you know, that goes back to what just we were saying, as like part of being a instructor, all the little things that you don't like understand, or that nobody understands, that you've got to learn on the fly. Like I used to be guilty of this too, like of knowing who my general core people were. Let's say it's you, and you know, we'll just name some people we know, or that you know, that other people know. But let's say it's you, a black belt. I won't name names, and then you know, blue belt and white belt, blah blah blah. But I know your games really well, so I'm like, okay, this move would be great for Gary. You know, this is the way he likes to pass. This would be awesome. This move would be great for that other guy because he's kind of got a front headlock thing. So I had this whole thing set up for these certain people. I get there, and then maybe 2 of the 5 are there, or 1 of the 5 are there, or whatever. And then my mood is just changed, because I'm like, F everybody. Where's the people at? Why you never come? Right? Like, where it's not even a big deal, but it's because of what I said. Like, I am so excited to have these people there and help them. So what it is like not their fault, right? It's not. What I had to do is readjust my training. So like, if I'm getting my hopes up that high and then getting them dashed and then being in a terrible mood and then treating people that have nothing to do with anything poorly, I was like, here's what I need to do is adjust on the fly to not everything. And then maybe take that person off to the side and say, hey, there's this like cool little thing I saw that maybe you'd be cool. And that's what I've been doing lately. And then, you know, everything's fine. But I had to like, and I know friends that still do it that way. They just come up with this game plan ahead for certain people. And I always warn them, say, man, you're just gonna be an angry person, man. You shouldn't do that. And they don't listen, but it's fine. Like, and maybe they're not as angry as me. I don't know. Like I would just turn from happy to angry. It's like a two say ruin the rest of my night. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things, like I said, there's so many intangible things, like, because I can teach, and I'm sure you can too, Gary. Like, and it happens all the time, like, because somebody will call and they didn't show up to class, right? I forever I taught without looking stuff up, like, you know, because I don't need to look it up. I think I'm more prepared if I have like step A, 2, and 3. But for 10, 15 years, I just walked in, looked and see who's there, and made up my mind in 4 seconds. That's how I taught. And surprisingly, it worked out well. For some people that would never work, but most people be like, man, it was an amazing class, like we should do that more often. And I'm like, I don't even know what we did. I just just did it, you know.
Okay, so that's not me.
I know,
No,
like,
I
yeah,
can't do that. For me, like, I go in with a clear game plan before class on usually what happens if I know it's going to be like one of those classes where it's an advanced class, and I don't necessarily have anything planned out, then I'll ask if they want to do a Q&A or if there's something they want to learn, and then we can
yeah,
go over that. But my preference is to have a general idea, and then I can think about, okay, what all do I know from X guard, you know, and then I can kind of throughout my day as I'm doing my whatever, figure out, okay, I know I'm doing X guard tonight. I want to make sure I go over this, and this. And then I go, and when I get there, I'll ask somebody like, hey, I just want to go through all of these moves real quick one time.
Yeah.
That way I can think about it. But I'm cerebral. Like I can't shoot from the hip like that. And part of that might be that I'm not confident in myself. You know, like I don't know how much of that is too.
I don't think it's hard to say because everybody's different. Like I'm not a very organized person in life, right? Like, you know, nobody would know it, but that's how my mind works. But recently, now that I'm older, my mind's not as good. Like my real job, I'm having to take off and like catch up. Where if I was more organized, I wouldn't have to catch up, right? Like used to be a time I just like shot off stuff, but that's the thing I'm learning now that I need to change some things, but that's how my mind's always worked. I don't do like I never understood the people that had a list, and it was mostly because of what I said. My list was different than what you're saying. Like I just had a rigid list that didn't have change in it, and these people needed to be there because I set up these moves for these people, which again, now it's like I've got material that I'm getting through, and I just joke with people like because I'm getting through the material. Like we go over moves one day, we drill them one day, we do everything. The next day we review the moves and we try to learn some more. And then like when people aren't there, I'm like, hey man, like I'm moving on without you. Like I've got want to get through this material, you know, which again, it's a little bit different, you know, like I think, but I couldn't, I think what would drive me crazy, I think, and reason I don't do that is my life's so crazy just because I have a job that's crazy, meaning that I can't really have a plan for my job. So my, you know, for people, it's like a sales job, which is very confusing in the name because it's not like I'm really selling much, but it's like I wake up with a plan, a general plan, and then as soon as I wake up, my phone's already ringing and I'm putting out fires all day. That is literally my job. I always joke is putting out fires and making people happy all day. People are just pissed. And I've got to like drive 2 hours to make somebody not pissed. And it may be something that's simple, but if I say it on the phone, they're not looking at me in the face, they're not understanding, they hate me, they hate everything, and then I got to go fix it. So like by the time I'm done, usually I'm exhausted. And if I had a plan, I'm annoyed because I didn't get none of it done because I had to do other stuff, right? So, and then that takes away from jujitsu and life because I don't, like I'm always hoping I've got about 30 minutes for class just to put my thoughts together. Most of the time I don't. But now, at least if I have 5, like what I'll do, you know, if I walk in at 5:55 and class starts at 6, I'll just tell somebody, hey man, like you might have to start the warm-ups out me. I just jot some stuff down real quick. So I'm still kind of shooting from the hip, but like it's a little bit better, you know what I'm saying? But nobody knows. Nobody's ideal, so it's all good. But it's again, I have to make adjustments for life, and it goes like I could sit and bitch and do stuff, but I got to make it work, and I have to be in a good mood. And when I'm, you know, putting out fires all day and getting yelled at all day, when 6 o'clock comes, I can't come in tired or annoyed. I have to be happy because if you're paying to come to my gym and the guy whose name's on the door is a dickhead, you ain't coming back. If I was like, don't, and I've been there, I have. I'm not going to pretend that stuff's never bothered me. I've sat in class and, you know, where I was teaching and did the warm-ups and the drills and talked to people a little bit, but mostly was quiet and just kind of removed, you know. And I know it's not right, but it's, you know, we're humans. But that's the thing that people don't get. When I was saying earlier that I know people's personalities, that's somewhat how people are all the time. And I'm like, hey, you could have a gym, but you're only going to have a certain amount of people there, right? Because you got to make everybody want to feel like they deserve to be there. Yeah. And the good thing I do it is the way you do it. And it's a true thing. Is if you come to my gym, which I say mine, and I kind of feel like it's everybody's, but we're like friends and we're family. And I truly believe that. It's not, I'm not just saying it. And that's why when you said we have parties, because we're all friends, like I want to hang out with my friends, right? Some people better than other because there's a conflict of or personality conflict. The one thing we have in common is jujitsu. And maybe we wouldn't be friends outside of that jujitsu, but we still kind of get along, you know, like, so we don't do as much, but we're still like, that's my friend, you know, bottom line. And that's also why I'm on another thing. Like I said, I don't ever call somebody my student. I never have. It might slip out in a conversation like this when we're talking in a different context, but no, I'm never going to say like, that's my friend first.
Well, and you know, that's something that that part of us, I think is the same. I'm Gary, and I've had when I started, the school that I started out wasn't very rigid as far as like traditional type stuff. And there wasn't a lot of bowing and there wasn't any of that. And that kind of changed a little bit. And that was one of the things that maybe I didn't like. It wasn't what ended everything for me, but like I've always thought like I haven't done anything special for anybody to call me anything other than Gary, Maybe if you want to call me coach, I guess. But like but even that doesn't feel right. I'm just a guy sharing some stuff that I learned, you
Yeah.
know? And whenever somebody's like professor,
Yeah.
like that just sounds so weird to me. Now, the truth is that I've done jujitsu longer than it takes you to become a lawyer,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so I understand and I appreciate the respect for that, but I don't know. I don't need the all of the ceremony that is around it. That just feels weird for me, you know?
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with the other way either. That's what I always tell
No,
people, right?
yeah,
Like,
people who want to do it, if you want to bow, I will respect whatever. If you're your academy, if you want to bow coming on the mat, off the mat, if you want me to bow to pictures of some guys that died before I was ever started jujitsu, if you want to, like, all of that stuff is fine, and I don't have any problems with that. It's just not my thing. And
yeah,
on top of that, if I'm at your school, I'll do all that stuff because
that's what
I respect you and what you're doing here. So
and
it's not a matter of me not thinking that stuff has any importance. It's just not my way of doing
yeah, I think, yeah, because that's what I think. I think it'd be hypocritical. I mean, like, there's a lot of things that I don't know. I treat people to how I'd be treated. Like, I wouldn't want to do that. I don't, again, like you said, I've done it. I will do it if that's the environment that I'm in, right? But I've always thought it's weird calling other men master, right? Like,
it.
it's
Yeah.
just not, it doesn't sit right with me. Have I done it? 100%.
Yep.
But when it set worse with me is when somebody demanded, and I'd say, hey, like, hey, something, something, and then they'd be like, it's master, and I'm like, okay, now we've got a problem. Like, you might still be able to kick my ass, but I'll run you over the car. Like, I'm not, like, it just rubs me wrong. Like, I don't, like, because I just don't, and that's the way I teach and the way you do too. I don't put myself ahead of somebody else, and again, it's not knocking anybody else, but I feel like if I was saying, call me master, I'm putting myself this league ahead of you. How can I turn it off when we go back out into the regular public? Because that's not what I don't want nobody calling me this or that, or even Mr. Right. Like, I get it with kids and even, and even kids I don't do that stuff with, but like, it just doesn't. But again, I've
Well,
been part of it.
here was something that I thought about is like if you're calling somebody master, or if somebody's calling you master, right? Let's put it on ourselves. If someone is calling you master, what happens when they start getting to the point where they beat you?
Yeah. I don't
Now
know.
now
Question.
do roles reverse and you have to call them master since they're the better one,
Yeah. I
which
don't.
makes things really weird, you know?
Valid question. Yeah. And it's like, if I was going to compare it to what in my other life, right, I deal with doctors all day, and a lot of I'm like, again, I treat that job the same. Like, those people are like my friends. That's how I'd
Yeah.
operate, right? So when I'm at work, I call them Doctor So and So, but I don't want to call them Doctor So and So when we're hanging out at, like, in jujitsu, right, or so and so. I would, I guess, if they really wanted me to, but then my friendship start lessening too, because I'm like, why? Unless
Right.
they explained it to me and they're like, I work so hard for this title and it means a lot to me. I just want you to call me that. Cool. All right, I get it. And as long as it's not something like you're putting yourself above me at that point, right? Because listen, one of my best friends is black belt with us, right? And I don't really have to remember because it's work, it's different. So I call him Dr. So and so. Hey, Dr. So and so. And like, I got to remember, like, don't call him by his name like I normally do, like, especially in front of other people, because I'm trying to treat him with the respect that he deserves in his workplace. And that's a different setting, right? And also, those people really wouldn't care, but it's like, I'm doing a sign of respect. I don't feel like anybody needs to do that for me in jujitsu. Now, with Elio Gracie was still around, and would I call him master? And so probably call him anything you wanted. That's the man, right? Like, there's a different level expect in a way, but and ultimately, I guess maybe I think the same would happen in jiu-jitsu, to make it clear. Like I would call everybody when I first meet them, whatever I want them to think they need to be called. And then I feel like as we become friends, hopefully those barriers drop. But if it doesn't, because they're very traditional, like I get it and I'm cool with it to a degree, but it's not me, right? So that's the thing. And I would ultimately, and I think, we'll probably talk about the affiliation thing later, but ultimately that's how I'd pick my affiliations too. We've kind of talked about that is, if those guys are making me feel like lesser than a human, that's not a place that I need to be, right? And if I'm not feeling like when we're hanging out at the club that I'm your friend, I'm still your student, then I've got other stuff to do, right? Like your jiu-jitsu might be awesome, but I ultimately want to hang out with people that I can get along with and learn from and have fun with. That's the part of jiu-jitsu to me. It's all goes together. When I said jiu-jitsu lifestyle, I gotta like that guy. Like I could train with somebody I don't like, but that can't be my main guy like every day. Like it's just not going to work. And that's how I treat them at the gym. I just assume, treat everybody with respect. And I know they're not bothered by calling us whatever, but let's not go there. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Let's just all be on an even playing field, and it's easier to be friends that way. It's easier to get along, and everybody's their guards down. Nobody's acting, like, I also feel like it makes people feel like the gym is theirs because they all have part of it. It's not like they're not saying like, this is, this guy and I'm on a pedestal. It's like we all take part in this place.
Yeah. Well, and that was the whole thing for me. Is like I always wanted. I'm sure you've seen Dodgeball, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I always wanted average Joes.
Yeah.
I don't want Globo Gym. I want average Joes. That's and the appeal of Globo Gym is that it's big and it's a moneymaker, and it measures success in the sense of like money and market share, right? But it's personally, it's not what I want,
Yeah.
I just want to, this is a passion project for me. And if it takes off, great, but I don't want it. I don't want it to change why I do jujitsu. I think all that stuff would soil it for me a little bit.
Well, that's a good thing too, to think of at the end, not necessarily that this has to be the end of our conversation, but what I'm thinking is that puts a good thing on it. Like if you're going from student to coach, you shouldn't change who you are to now be a coach, right? Have a sorry, I keep coughing, but you should have a part of you that shows when you're teaching and training and having a gym, whatever that is, because that's what makes you a special person. That's going to draw those people to that, right? We're all a little bit different. Just like I expect in a weird way, like your guys should love you more than me, right? And vice versa, just because that's who they're around and they've picked us, right? For that thing. And luckily, when I'm saying that, it's kind of a joke, but also luckily we're kind of the same people. So people like us all pretty much, right? I assume, right?
Yeah.
I've noticed like, and this doesn't go with you, but I've had several people when we're talking, they'll say about one of the affiliates, like, I don't like that guy. Like literally say that to me, which is mind blowing. And sorry if anybody's listening to this, but there people have personality and they'll just say, I don't like him. I'm like, why? You don't even know him. And like, they'll say something that's very like trivial to me, but I get it. Like, cause I've been there.
Who said they didn't like me? That's fine. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, well, nobody has. I mean, you're on the one length that, or the one, really there's not a ton. There's one guy in particular I hear a lot that they don't like, but it is, I'm not even gonna get into it. And I don't even address it with that person. But it's like every time I'm asked why, there's very goofy stuff that goes back to the communication thing. I almost teach like a marriage course right now, but I'm just like, why don't you just like, if that bothered you, why don't you just ask? Like, I'm sure they don't care. And they'd be like, I just hated them every day since then. I'm like, oh, but
it's amazing how one bad interaction with somebody and you feel slighted by something that they said or they did and took it wrong. And there's just like, this is that person because I've decided that's who he is.
Yeah. And then you don't hang out, right? You hang out with our tribe, the Bobcat guys and the the Charleston guys and the Bluefield guys and these guys and this guys, they all have their own tribe. And if somebody from another tribe says something slightly different, they don't, a lot of times they don't even try to figure out what was going on. They just don't like that tribe because that's how we're wired. It's like you like your little group, right? And it goes back to what I was saying. Like I don't feel like I'm stuck in the middle of all this stuff all the time because look, also people don't have to like each other either, but it's just like it's just funny. Just listen to personalities a lot of times because I'm like, yeah, you know, I just thought we were gonna do jiu-jitsu. Like we'd roll, I'd show you something, you show me something. But now we're talking about why you don't like this guy, why this guy, but you know, like, you know, why this instructor sucks, or why the guy that I like or that I learned from is garbage and the ones that you learned from is great. You know, it's like I don't get it. I really don't get it. Or the argument of, you know, gi versus no gi, which, you know, like it's jujitsu, right? It's still jujitsu. Like there should be no argument of anything, right? In my opinion. But I think it goes to like some of that tribalism, right? Like we're all on a team and you're defending your team. And sometimes that's why people are a little bit nitpicky on stuff. But again, it just goes back to like,
well, and everything. We fight over everything. I mean, just as people, we fight over it. We fight over which way the toilet paper roll falls, and we fight over, you know, what Pink Floyd album was better, you know.
And that's the truth right there. I mean, not to interrupt, but like don't dumb that people shouldn't dumb that down, because not even dumb it down is not the right word, but I guess overlook it, because we tend to say, like you would say, I like Dark Side of the Moon, and I'm like, I like The Wall. And you're like, you're fucking dumb. And then I'm like, you're fucking dumb. But we don't mean it. And like,
right.
You know, like, and that's it. But it seems like for some reason, it's like with certain things, I guess if that's your, like, I don't even, hell, music people, I don't know why it's weird with jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, well, I think that's stupid, or that guy's dumb. And I'm like, okay, who cares? I think he's not, you know, like, and it's almost an argument. I'm like, okay, I mean, whatever. But yeah, it is weird how, because politics is that way. That's one of the few things that people are religion, right? Like it's very rigid, where most things in the world, like people like, I don't like gray shirts. I never wear gray, you know, like make me look fat. You're weird, you know, like, and then I don't know. It blows my mind anymore, you know?
Well, that kind of leads us. So if Butch Hiles had never done jujitsu, and today you were like, man, I need to be doing something, and I'd really like to learn a martial art, and you walk into a place, what are you looking for in a jiu-jitsu gym if you're a new student today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, ultimately what I look for still now is when I come in, am I going to get along with people first and foremost, right? I think, Gary, on another podcast, you said something that's true. Jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu in essence. I kind of feel like that. I mean, people can nitpick that statement and they say it's not right. This guy's better. And that's not really what we're saying, is that we're going to get there because most of us in the jiu-jitsu world, right, we learn in the gym what you show, I show, or Marcelo Montero, Hoist Gracie, or whoever these people are show us, right? But then we go out on our own and with our friends, and we also learn. And I would argue sometimes we get more learning there, right? More learning open mat, more learning on instructionals and YouTube. So to that statement, I think you're right. Jiu-jitsu is in jiu-jitsu. So like, do I like the people? Do I like the environment? It's something that I jive. It's something that I'm happy to go to and spend my time at. That's the bottom line. I got to be happy. And that's also why, like, going by that, that's why I let people take a week free at our gym. And I usually tell, like, when I'm on the phone or an email, like, because they're like, oh no, I want to sign up today. And that's great, right? As a business person, I should get them on the hook and have them sign up, right? And again, for people that don't know, like, I don't mean that I'm doing that. That's what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah,
but I don't.
Well, and that's the solid business model, right? Yes. Is catch them and keep them.
Yes,
and do that. Yeah,
you're committed, right? And that's what you want. But that's what I said. Hey, listen, I know what you're saying, because you want to be obligated, so you show up. But here's what I want. I want you to make sure you like me and you like everybody else. And they go, that's funny. It's like, no, I'm joking. I'm not joking. What if you show up and you think I'm a douchebag? You're not gonna want to come, right? And they're like, oh man, I appreciate that. Like, they never really thought it through, right? But I wouldn't want to show up to a gym and the guy's like, man, you gotta sign up for a year, and then I don't go anymore because I hate everybody there. Right? Like, it's very, very possible. How many times have friends of ours went on vacation to roll with people and they give us terrible stories? I've heard a lot of good ones, but I've heard a lot of bad ones too. You don't want to be there, right?
Yeah.
So my number one thing would be just literally how I get along with people. And does it fit my style? Like I'm not adverse to wearing only a white gi, right? But that's not really my style either. I look fat in a white gi, so I kind of want to like look slim and trim. Like my wife even makes fun of me if I have a white gi on. It's like she's like, take that off. So like a lot of those things, I'm looking more non-traditional. Don't mind a little bit thrown in, but I think I like that part too. Is that if you want to wear like some goofy stuff, wear it within reason. I'm actually probably too far to the degree I've heard like Tom DeBlas and some of those guys, they're with us, but they're like, there's certain gis they don't allow. And I've had people walking with tie-dye and we just laugh about it. Right. But
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
So for me, like, if I was walking in today and I didn't know any jiu-jitsu and I was just looking for a place to train, I think first and foremost is I'm looking whoever's running the place. And not that there's a right way to do it, because I don't think that there's necessarily, there are wrong ways to do it, but I don't think there's a right way to do it. I think there are multiple right ways. I too am also looking for something a little less traditional. It'd be a little different if we were in feudal Japan and you were feeding me and clothing me, and then I've got to fight for the emperor because you took care of me. Then but I've never gotten away from the fact that I was a guy paying for a service. It's still a business transaction. So if I'm paying for a service, I want it to be a service that I like, and so. Yeah. Hence the non-traditional, and I don't want to call it American jiu-jitsu because I think that's kind of silly. Then that's kind of a thing that's going on now with Keenan and some of those guys calling it American jiu-jitsu, and that's fine. I don't care if they do that or not. But for me, I just want something that is a little more relaxed environment where, there's decent structure to the class, but a little more free thought than maybe the traditional place. I want people to be able to ask questions and figure things out a little bit. I've been in some classes where, and not necessarily the last place that I was at, but just traveling and doing classes where people, if you spoke up, it was frowned upon, and asking questions is kind of frowned upon that weren't specific to this technique. Anytime somebody, I might be showing an armbar or something and somebody will ask me about, well, what if they did this? My answer is that's a different class. And then we move on. I don't need to berate them about it, or this is for this response, or that response is usually, what if they did this? That's usually the next thing I'm teaching. That's the next demonstration. It's coming.
The best answer to that one time was, not to be mean, but when I was in California for work, somebody brought that up during a presentation. The guy said, what if my aunt had a dick? I thought that was the funniest thing I've ever heard in my whole life. Like, and everybody just stopped and they're like, what? And he's like, we can ask what ifs all day. Let's move on or something. But it was funny. It's like, when I say it sounds kind of mean, but everybody laughed their ass off. Like, I thought it was just the funniest thing ever. And it, again, and he's not making fun of anybody. It was just the weirdest comeback. And I'll never forget that to the day I die. But what if, right?
Yeah. And you're always going to have the what ifs, but I won't entertain questions, not to entertain questions to the end of time, but I like that thought provoking. For me, I ask a lot of questions, and so I want to be able to think about things and come up with ideas. And I think that's kind of why we have jiu-jitsu growing the way it is because people asking questions and thinking outside the box, or thinking about what isn't exactly here right now. So I kind of encourage that to a certain degree. So I would like to see that where, and I think that comes from it being a little more non-formal too.
Yeah.
The formality is like, I'm here, I'm talking, nobody else speaks, and it's kind of ridiculous.
Putting yourself above other people though, right? I wouldn't treat somebody like that in normal life, or I would try not to. Let's put it that way, right? Like, a normal everyday thing. If somebody asked me just a random question, like, I'm not going to be like, dude, like I'm doing this, right? I might, but like my version is a little funnier. So I get to the
Yeah.
point and I don't berate them. Like that's the most important. I think when I was with the Japanese jiu-jitsu group, traditional, they would scream at people that try to help people and say, you're not the instructor. Who's the instructor? Who's the black belt here? Right. And it made you feel little. But unfortunately, that's some of what happens at some traditional places more so than not. And that's why we say we're anti-tradition somewhat, because I'm not anti-tradition. I'm anti that. I'm anti-dickhead. And unfortunately, power kind of corrupts people. And that's kind of the thing, right? We put somebody in power and the head of a class, and it corrupted that person to start treating people like dog shit, right? Don't treat me like a child. Like it's different when you yell at a child like that because you're trying to teach them respect and get their attention. It could be a free for all with a child, but not with an adult. Even a problem adult, I have some problem adults, and I still try to treat them the best that I can. Right? I've got some adults with poor social skills, and we just kind of jokingly shut them up. But it's again not to put them. I don't say like who's in charge here. It's just like something happened today, dude. Like keep your mouth shut. Like like we'll and whatever the joke is. It's just a joke,
right.
But
but outside of that, I think like going back to you is like, are they people that I can get along with? Not necessarily be best friends with, but are these people that I can hang out with 2 hours a night?
Yeah.
And that's really what I need is, and all the relationships and stuff will, as far as like jujitsu friendships, it'll build off of that anyway.
Yeah.
So if we were going to be friends, we'll be friends. But, first and foremost, even if we're not going to be best friends outside of this, are most of the people here people that I can hang out with for 2 hours? That's what I need.
Yeah. And that's hard to judge right off the bat, right? So I think you said it right. Like maybe you're not going to have a lay of the land of all the students there, all the gym members there, but you can get a general feeling of the instructor. And what I've noticed is, however that guy is, how everybody else would be. If that guy's a dick, they're going to be a dick, right? I could name gyms that are Brazilian jiu-jitsu gyms, and the instructor is an ass, and so are all the people. And so like that's the easiest way to figure it out. Like you might not have time to inventory 30 individuals and find out if you're going to like them and get along with them. But if the kind of people running it all seem pretty generally cool, and you get this good vibe from them, I'm going to bet that you're going to get a good vibe from everybody else. Doesn't mean that every single person is going to be awesome. Just like you said, not going to be the same, but generally speaking, right? Like I can look at Gary's guys at Bobcat. I love them all, right? Like I feel like they're kind of general same personality. Hopefully you think the same. And in Charleston, I can name every affiliate gym we have there. They're much like that person, right? It just is what it is, right? So I think that's a good thing. That's what I always, like I said, that's what I joke with other people. I was like, make sure you like me before you go. I'm like, and like, they're like, okay, like whatever that means. Nobody knows what that means, but it's important. It really is. I mean, that's like money coming out of your pocket, plus like a couple hours of your time, like all kinds of things. You're giving up time with your family, everybody else.
Well, and not only that, but like how good of a relationship is it going to be student teacher if they come in and they sign up and they have a year or whatever, and they find out, week 3 that they don't like you.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to get good press for that one student, right? They're going to go around, they're going to be like, I'm locked into this bullshit contract for the next, 9-10 months. And I don't even like this guy, he's an asshole or whatever. Where, if they come in and they like it and they know they like it, now it's only going to be good word of mouth that's traveling as far as for your gym.
Yeah, that is a solid point. So I would argue to say, not that I know there's bad word of mouth about all of us. There definitely is, but in general, it's good stuff. I've seen like I get a lot of emails where everybody's like, I asked where to train. Everybody says you, right? Like the reason they're all saying that is in general, they hear like people go there and have a good time, or people go there and they know myself and my wife, and they're like, man, they're good people. They treat people nice. And like, we also don't berate people when they quit. Some people do that because they take it personally, or if somebody starts another gym, or because it's just a workout, right? How many times do we all change our workout routine or go somewhere else or change a gym because it's closer to the house or the time means better, meaning a weightlifting gym? And nobody, like the Y is not mad at Planet Fitness and vice versa, because I went somewhere like, But in jujitsu, that happens a lot. And then, like, you know, I had to teach my wife that early on. Not that she was really crazy about it, but she'd take it personal if somebody like they're not coming anymore. And then she'd be like stalking their thing. Oh, they're over here. I'm like, hey man, they still
I
love
always
you.
thought about that. Like, can you imagine if somebody changed doctors and the doctor was like, "Why the fuck did you leave me?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't believe you're seeing Doctor Porter down the road. Like, you should have
yeah.
still been mine."
And and there probably is some people like that, right? There, on for sure, because I actually hang out with those guys. Like they're right. But in general, like if you treat people good, you don't have to know. Like it's not always personal, right? Or it still could be, and that's their right is to not like me. Like not everybody's
Yeah,
gonna like, you know. I want everybody to like me, but there's people that I judge. We all judge, right? I meet somebody and
yeah,
their face looks mean, and I don't like them because I'm like that guy's an asshole. But I've never
yeah.
talked to him. His face
Well,
just mean.
and that's it. Like, and it kind of comes back that there are just some people who are not meant to be with this other person. Like these
Yeah,
two people are not meant to be around each other. You
yeah,
know, and just like if you believe in like, hey, there's one person for everybody. I don't necessarily believe that, but there are certainly people who are better for each other, and there are people who are probably not good combinations. If you're
yeah,
not a good combination, you shouldn't be there. You like get yourself out of that situation. You
yeah,
know, go somewhere else. Go somewhere where you're with the person who you're supposed to be with.
yeah. Well, it's
So
good advice all the way around.
yeah,
On that note, we should quit it because when I was speaking earlier about taking care of my son, I'm a little bit late to his basketball game that I got to run to. So better get down there before he beats me up, you know,
yeah,
my middle son. But anyway, I think that was a good conversation on such stuff. We can cover the affiliation stuff later. I mean,
yeah,
I think we hit a lot of target or topics that made me think a little bit, and hopefully made some other people think of things they didn't think about, right? Whether they're looking to train and become a trainer or just looking for a gym. I mean, there's a lot of things that go in that you don't even know you're looking for until you get there. But maybe these are things that make kind of like open somebody's eyes because look, here's the deal. Like back when you and I started, there wasn't a lot of options. Like you had one gym per city, if you're lucky, or per half hour, per hour. Now, you know, in Charleston, which is shocking, there's a few gyms, right? Like there's places you got options now. So you don't have to go and you don't have to be stuck. You know, like I know a lot of people miserable at the places they are, but they're loyal. And that's the part I wanted to kind of get to with the affiliation thing. There's nothing wrong with being loyal, but you also need to be happy. So you should find a happy medium. And we'll get into that later, you know, but ultimately we just want people to be happy doing jiu-jitsu like we are, right? That's it.
yeah. All right, brother. Well, go get the basketball game. Take care,
All right,
and
man.
I'll see you soon.
All right. It's always good catching up. And thank you for
Yeah,
doing this, man. Go Bengals for you tomorrow. I appreciate it.
yeah. Go Joey.
All right. See you, man.
Later.